Dennis Martin, our turf grass extension specialist, has joined us again today to demonstrate how to establish cool season lawns. Thanks for joining us, Dennis.
Thanks, Kim. It's great to be on the show again.
Before we start with our demonstration, I was wondering if you could just review the types of grass seed that we're going to be using.
Certainly. Here we're talking about perennial cool season grasses. Those consist usually of tall fescue and Kentucky bluegrass. Occasionally perennial ryegrass is used. For sites where tall fescue has worked well in the past, we continue to suggest that people go back to using a blend of tall fescues, which means 2 or more types of tall fescue varieties in the mix. On those sites where maybe they've had some problems with tall fescue, but largely it's persisted, we'd suggest they use a mix of tall fescue and Kentucky bluegrass. The tall fescue's there usually at 90 to 95% by weight, the bluegrass in there at 5 to 10% weight. And I'd just like to point out, we never suggest people use exclusively Kentucky bluegrass or exclusively perennial ryegrass as their shade-tolerant grasses.
Okay. Are there other grass seeds that we want to avoid using?
Yes, there sure is. Occasionally you can find mixes where annual ryegrass is involved with tall fescue or Kentucky bluegrass, and that concept is called using the annual ryegrass as a nurse grass. That really doesn't have a good place in our consumer landscapes. It's far too aggressive and dies out in summer, leaving our cool season perennial grass to look pretty poor in summer. Also in Oklahoma, we don't suggest the use of creeping red fescue because it just doesn't have the shade tolerance that we need in hot shaded sites.
Okay. Now before we get started establishing the lawn, we want to conduct a soil test, is that right?
That's right. That's the basic first step in any proper lawn management program.
Okay, well let's get started.
Right.
Okay, Dennis, can you tell us a little bit about the purpose of the soil test here?
Yes. Purpose of the soil test is to locate any problems with soil pH or soil reaction or the phosphorus or potassium present in the soil. Those are some of the nutrients that are required in the largest amount. Of course, we'll add nitrogen through fertilization, but if there's any big deficiencies or problems with soil pH, that's what the soil test will locate for us. And we want to get that soil test done 2 to 3 weeks in advance of actually renovating an area.
Okay, and where do we send our soil samples?
Okay, we want to get our soil sample bags from the county extension office, and they hold approximately a half pint of soil, and they have places there to indicate what soil test we're after, and we're looking for the basic soil test analysis. It's still only $10 per sample, and that's one of the best values you can have for assuring that you're going to have a good lawn management program. What we're going to do is ask you to get about 10 to 20 samples from around the lawn, compile them together, mix them up, and then put them into the approximate half pint bag there, and then ship them off to your county extension office.
Okay, wonderful. And when we're collecting our soil samples, you want to scrape away the upper surface if there's some organic matter on top?
Right, we don't want to send the thatch layer in there or a bunch of plant materials, so we want to get the top 2 to 3 inches of soil. That's where the root zone is for turf grasses and what they're actually going to experience in the way of the nutrients that they're exposed to.
Okay. You want to make sure that you put your soil samples directly into the bags provided, and don't use any plastic bags because this impedes with the sampling process. Okay, once we get our soil samples back, we're ready to begin planning for lawn establishment.
That's right. The county extension office will make the interpretations on the test results, and then we'll buy a fertilizer that's consistent with what those recommendations are.
Okay.
The process of establishment has several distinct steps to it. If you have undesirable perennial vegetation there, that usually involves a broadcast application with the herbicide Roundup, a non-selective herbicide, and we read and follow all label directions there. Then there is a tillage step, and you do have to coordinate with what your tree and landscape system is. We don't want to damage the shallow tree roots, so you kind of read every site and find out if you can just scratch the soil surface or whether you can do a tillage to about 4-inch depth. 4-inch depth would be ideal, but we don't want to damage the tree roots. At the very least, we need to rake and scratch the site to loosen it up for the plants to root into. If we are able to till to a 4-inch depth. The next step, if the soil test determines that we had some gross deficiencies in nutrient or a pH, for instance, that's very acidic and we need lime, at that point we apply the appropriate soil amendment, and it's tilled in and mixed with the bulk of the soil.
Okay.
Next, we'll rake the soil, rake out imperfections. We don't want any little areas that will puddle, and we'd like to have like a 0.5% slope minimum so that water will move off the site appropriately and not puddle for us. We'll follow up with a rolling with a lawn roller. That's to firm the soil. Then we come in with another little light raking to lightly scratch the soil, break up the crust, usually followed by the seeding itself, followed by a step of application of surface fertilizer, which has the nitrogen containing component. Then we come in yet again with a roller, and that step firms the seed to the soil, gets us a good seed-soil contact. After that, if we're going to use a mulch, such as a paper mulch or a straw mulch, that's the next and final step prior to beginning our irrigation program to get the seed to germinate. Then what we need to visit about next is the types of pieces of equipment that we need in a lawn renovation or establishment project. There's several key pieces of equipment. Now, one can actually buy these at their department store, or they could go to a rental agency and rent them. A lot of times they can rent a higher quality piece of equipment, because really you're not going to be using these things all the time, so you might be ahead just to rent them.
Okay.
What I'd like to discuss first is the two main types of spreaders of seed or fertilizer that one would encounter.
Okay.
The first main type is a drop type spreader. Now, we've seen Jay using this in our demonstration here. This is a commercial piece of equipment and actually heavy grade, so the consumer probably would not want to actually purchase one this heavy of grade for their case, but it's a high quality piece of equipment. Drop type spreader where the material is metered out through the bottom of the spreader.
Okay. And what's the advantage of this type?
The advantage of a drop spreader is they're very accurate in their application rate, and the pattern stops at a very definite point. So that brings up a very important point, that you have to know exactly where the last hole in the bottom of the hopper is, because it has to match up with your next pass as you come by on either side of where the previous pass was.
Okay.
The next main grouping of fertilizer spreaders are what we call the whirlybird or centrifugal type spreaders. They can be a handheld unit such as you have here. The benefit of the handheld centrifugal is that it allows you the maximum in maneuverability in a tight landscape. However, they don't have the ability to be calibrated real well, so you have to have your garden scale and know how much total seed that you're putting out on a known area, and you deliver the seed until it's gone from the hopper.
Okay.
The other type of centrifugal spreader has a more accurate metering system, and you see it here. The material falls through the bottom of the gate, and the gate size hole is controlled by a lever setting. It then hits a spitting plate, very much like the handheld centrifugal, and it's thrown out to either side and center. Now, this allows you to finish an area very, very quickly. However, you have to watch where the edges of the pattern at. Sometimes you'll throw seed accidentally into ornamental beds or the garden, certainly where you don't want to get it placed.
Okay. And then there were two different types of rakes used earlier.
That's right. Here is the garden type rake that I'm holding. I like to use these for when I'm bringing a large amount of soil over and trying to fill imperfections. But this really isn't a final surface device. What you're holding there is the light tined rake, and I like that for the final detail work of the site. It doesn't move a lot of soil, but it takes care of slight imperfections, and it's also a good incorporation rake to be used in establishment.
Okay. And this is the last piece of equipment we use?
Yes, this is a lawn roller, and it's not used very often, and usually these can be rented from a local rental agency, but it's good for firming the soil, for good seed soil contact, and that's about all we ever use it for in a lawn establishment situation.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us and demonstrating how to seed our cool season lawns.
Thank you.